I've lived my entire life in Australia and have spent over 20 years as an educator. 18 months ago, I made a move to a remote part of Australia that has changed my view of my country and my understanding of what my role as an educational leader is. Most of you would know Australia for its extremes, its weather, its wildlife and environment. But it's one extreme that I'll focus on today, social disadvantage and its impact on the oldest living culture in the world, Australian Aboriginals. Our Aboriginal students face some of the greatest social disadvantages of our nation's population. Families are faced with trauma, domestic violence, poor health, high mortality, low literacy and numeracy, and overcrowding. The majority of my students live locally, but some of my students come from small, remote Aboriginal communities, hundreds and thousands of kilometres away. These communities are extremely isolated and remote. They are cut off from the rest of the world during the wet season, and there is very little opportunity for employment. They have limited access to healthcare, and education in communities does not cater for students who want to finish high school or further their education. If students from communities want to complete high school, they have to move away from their family, and this means moving from their community to a boarding school in the city, thousands of kilometres away. They are then denied the opportunity to grow up learning about their native culture and native language. These children face enormous challenges just getting to school, let alone doing their best once they're seated in the classroom. The only consistency and routine that they rely on comes in the form of a structured school day. It's because of this that these students love school. Through building trust and positive relationships, I'm able to engage students in a structured routine, and most importantly, I model a positive, consistent routine to start the school day. Mornings at our school start with staff conducting early pickups in buses and school cars, followed by exercise like our football training, a hearty breakfast and fresh clothing in preparation for a successful school day. After school, students are provided structured homework classes and engaging activities, and by doing this for our most at-risk students, we are able to bridge the gap between what they don't have and what our most privileged students do have, structure and routine outside the timetabled school day. I've been in education for a number of years, and I had an opportunity to move to a remote part of Australia that I'd never been to, and ended up moving to the Kimberley in Broome, Western Australia. It was a bit of a culture shock for me and my family, because we had never really engaged or understood the history of Australia and the importance of understanding Indigenous culture and that the value that that could play in our education system and also in our lives. So part of what I did when I first moved to Broome was to commit myself to listen and understand and learn about the local Indigenous culture and also broader communities throughout the rest of the Kimberley. So in doing that, a lot of what I learnt was that what I had been doing as part of education within the school setting for what was 20 years was something that worked in that setting, but here in the same country, only a few thousand kilometres from where I'd been working before, I found I was in a completely different context. I needed different ways to engage and earn trust from the students and the community, and realised very quickly that what I needed to do was involve myself within the lives of these students and families, not only within hours of the school day, but outside of school, and involve and learn and listen to understand what their needs were. I remember the author at this particular point in time, but they talked about the fact that we can only influence the child between the hours of 8 and 3 when they're at school. And I thought that is so wrong and so different to the situation that I'm in here. It was more about, for me, if I was going to influence a child between the hours of 8 and 3, I needed to understand them outside of those hours. They feel like they're coming to a place where they don't belong, where I've set up structures that are based on the school system that we work within, and they have to try and assimilate and fit into that structure. So when I'm thinking through and was thinking through my through line and what I wanted to bring across, it was more about what I could do outside of my normal role here as a principal between the hours of 8 and 3. But what can I do and what can others do to make sure that that role is more effective and has more of an impact on the success of students during that school day. What I've learnt is that a lot of the times we've got to step outside to learn about other cultures and other ways that people live within our diverse community. Now, for me to get to know those students better, I have to put myself in their shoes. So I get up at the early time that they get up and then go to football training and train with them as if I was one of the students in that group. And that way I can start to relate and then have conversations and then open that trust and that relationship with those students. That impact of making sure that we can build a strong foundation means that when there is an issue at school, I already have that connection and I am able to work through situations or challenges much easier than if we didn't have that connection. And that has been a very fruitful situation to be in on many occasions. The other is connecting myself with the local or the traditional owners of Broome and making sure that I understand and am respectful of the needs of the people that have been here for tens of thousands of years. So the process for me in coming up with this idea and where it ended up was more about my personal journey and what I've learnt as someone who had probably been in a bit of a routine of doing the same thing year in, year out, and putting myself up here in the remote Kimberley and being out of my comfort zone and learning about a new side of Australia that I didn't understand. And I've lived here for over 40 years now, and I'm here still learning and trying to understand what this place is about and what I'm about and what I can do for my country and help the Indigenous people of this country have a voice and have an ally in myself to get that voice to be heard. And it's a big part of where I want to go in the future with this, and really get the voice of our Indigenous people heard and understood, valued, and given the respect that it deserves.